I've been an IT entrepreneur for the last 30 odd years, and this is actually I'm in my third inning, having done two ventures earlier and exited out of that. And when I started out on the third time, there was this thought that we needed to start a fund, VC fund, because I was quite interested in mentoring startups and so on, at least in the Pune community. And then we realized that there's a lot of entrepreneurial activity here in Pune, but no fund. And that was the trigger when I was starting my third inning that we should start a fund. And then, of course, we found some like-minded partners in Pune itself who also wanted to start this fund. We joined hands, and that's how Pentathlon Ventures happened. I think mostly the micro-VC definition is based on the corpus that you're raising. And our fund is 10 million, or in INR it was 65 crores. We of course got over invested, and we are now oversubscribed, and we got to 77, 78 crores. But still, it's a micro VC. And to be honest, because I was new to this area, I did not know this term myself. So I did not know that a 10 million fund is called a micro venture capital firm. And so that's the reason. What I think what happens is we were starting out. This was the first fund, and hence we wanted to raise a small fund and learn the ropes of the VC industry. And that's what all of us partners were most keenly wanted to do. And that's why we started with a micro fund. That we had our entrepreneurial background. All six partners have entrepreneurial background, but only one of us had an investment background. So that was the key in starting this fund, that we wanted to grow a small but very actively participating in that fund, and that's how we got together to start this micro VC. Most other funds will probably be larger in terms of the corpus that they are raising. With a micro VC, what happens is that you are a small bunch of people, and then you are also talking to the network of around you, closest to you, and hence there also comes up some kind of a focus area, because you have a background and you're talking to the network of people that you are personally known to. So, and in our case, that common background seems to be being an entrepreneur. So all of us are entrepreneurs. In fact, you'll be happy to know that the entire investor base that we have are all first generation entrepreneurs. Most of them from Pune, but all of them are first generation entrepreneurs. Now that gives a certain character which I believe every micro VC needs. Whether sometimes it will be some city based micro VC, sometimes it could be a sector based micro VC. So we are entrepreneur driven, by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs kind of micro VC. Not really. It's still a proper VC. We don't join in as an operational VC, but we have seen the difference in talking to the entrepreneurs. So what we have focused on, and let me talk about the focus that we have decided as a fund. It's a early stage B2B tech focused fund. Why is that the case? Because all of us come from a B2B background. None of us have a B2C background. So that is one part that I answered earlier, that everybody comes with a background and you want to use that background. So that's why B2B tech. Why early stage? Because we have ourselves gone through the journey, and we feel that the biggest value that we can bring is to the early stage startups, early stage founders, and help them into their growth path. So that is our thinking behind doing this early stage B2B tech kind of a focus fund. Yeah.
Understood. So now that we know that micro VCs come in at an early stage, but I think the term early in startup ecosystem has varied meanings.
Correct.
So when you say early, how do you define the term early?
So early is in terms of revenues, clearly. So if you have significant revenues, then you're not early. And typically when the startups are starting out, they are trying to figure out, they have already identified a problem. They have identified a solution to it, but the product market fit may or may not be there, for example. And so the revenues may not be very high. They're exploring, they're trying to do different things, and hopefully the product market fit gets found. And then they get to a stage where growth funds can come in and they can scale the operation. So once the product market fit is very clearly established, then the growth funds can come in and then they can scale the operation. But till that time, you need a lot of exploring that needs to happen to firm up this product market fit. In our case also, there is a mix. Some people have a product market fit, some people don't have a product market fit. So we are not operating the company, we are not operating the venture, but we are clearly able to give them inputs in terms of how you go about finding that product market fit for the solution that you have found for the problem that you are facing. So that early stage help we are able to do.
So to summarize a bit, it's essentially a startup who may have a perfect co-founder or may not have a perfect founding team, but has a sense of what they're building, how do they want to build it, and has maybe an MVP product ready, but does not exactly know the way to go to the market.
Right. I would concur with that. We have not invested in companies who didn't have a product. So we have not invested in completely ideas or decks or something like that. I feel, to my mind, that is angel territory. So angels who are experts in those spaces can figure out that, okay, this idea has some legs and it will go for. But we come in when there is a product. There may or may not be revenue. So we have invested in two buckets. So one is where there is significant revenue. There are like 2 years of revenue, and we can apply our B2B SaaS metrics and figure out the valuation. But the other pre-revenue bucket is where there is no revenue or very, very early revenue, few months, couple of months of revenue, let's say. Then what metrics are you going to apply? So in that case, what you're looking at is what space they are operating in. The space needs to be, quite attractive. For example, we invested quite a bit in video space, for example. So video is a hot space. We know that during the pandemic, remote and all of that. So that space is hot, and so you would invest in that. And then the founders, they are different use cases even in video, for example. So they are trying to pick a different kind of a problem, and they are trying to apply that use case. Now, it is not always the case that it's completely figured out, and that's the journey that we want to help people with. Yes.
Correct. I think when you say that there is a product ready but may not have a market fit, in this definition, we kind of struggle with figuring out if a startup should reach you when they have an early traction, or even without that, it's okay to kind of reach out to you.
So I would say traction is required, but not revenues. I'll tell you what I mean by that. You may have pilots going on, for example, right? So even those pilots are important for us to see what is happening. Ultimately, the traction or the revenue that we are looking at is more for the validation of the idea. What problem you're targeting and what solution you're providing. It's more for the validation, because there are not enough revenues to do any kind of metric calculation and so on. So a lot of it is to do with, even if there are no revenues, if there are early pilots who are not, let's say, paid pilots, but there are pilots or the customers who are using that product, which means that they obviously have some kind of a problem which this product is solving. We do a lot of customer reference calls in this. So that is where we get to know whether that problem is real, how big is it, what the customers see really this solution solving in terms of that problem. So those things are important. If there is revenue, of course, it's a bigger validation. But even without revenue, we have done customer reference calls to understand the use case itself, how big is it, and then is the solution the right solution for it in terms of competing with the other tens of solutions that could be there for that problem. Yes. So early is in terms of revenues, clearly. So if you have significant revenues, then you're not early. And typically, when the startups are starting out, they are trying to figure out, they have already identified a problem, they have identified a solution to it, but the product market fit may or may not be there, for example. And so the revenues may not be very high. They're exploring, they're trying to do different things, and hopefully the product market fit gets found. And then they get to a stage where growth funds can come in and they can scale the operation. So once the product market fit is very clearly established, then the growth funds can come in and then they can scale the operation. But till that time, you need a lot of exploring that needs to happen to firm up this product market fit. In our case also, there is a mix. Some people have a product market fit, some people don't have a product market fit. So we are not operating the company, we are not operating the venture, but we are clearly able to give them inputs in terms of how you go about finding that product market fit for the solution that you have found for the problem that you are facing. So that early stage help we are able to do. So founding team is the most important. I would just add that a complementariness in that founders. Is there somebody who understands the tech? Is there somebody who understands the business side of it? So these are 2 or 3 things that we look at. So there is tech, there is domain, and there is business side of it. So if there are these 3 things that are there in the founding team, and of course sometimes one founder may have 2 of these. That's absolutely fine. But those that complementary ness in that founding team is very important to have all those things in place. the market and what we call the addressable market, all of that is very important, because you want the companies to be solving a big problem, not a small problem. So if they need to solve a big problem, we need to know. They may not be there at all right now. They may have just very small revenues, but then you need to know that there is a big enough market. So there is a big enough problem to be solved, and these guys are solving that. So that is the second one. And the third one, like you rightly said, is the solution. Is it a good solution for that? And there I would just qualify that by saying, when you say solution, it's not just the technological solution, also the model. So we look at that. Can the technology scale is important, but also can the model scale? So model is very important as the founders also. No, it's impossible. Like you said, it's impossible to spot a unicorn that early. And unicorns in general would take 10 years or more to become unicorns. Whereas we are talking about our life of 6 + 2 years. So it is very unlikely that within our fund's life that unicorn is going to happen. So we like the fact that they are in the right problem space and they have a solution which will scale, but it's very hard to say that it's going to be a unicorn. To be honest, a lot of times for us, especially in the B2B space, the exit is going to happen through M&A. So somebody is going to acquire them, and that's also very valid and good exit. So it's not necessary that we have a question in our list saying, can this become a unicorn? But actually, there are two things that we really look for in these companies, and if these things are mentioned in the deck or in their presentation, then we are good. One is why you, and this is basically the founder problem that you talked about. So why is it that you will be able to solve this? As you also know, it's going to be hardly the case that the problem or the solution is going to be so unique that only you are doing it, nobody else is doing it. In fact, that won't be a very valid case. So then if there are 10 people doing it, why is it you that you would succeed? If they are answering that question in the deck, then that's a thing that we would want to look at. And secondly, why now? That's the second question. That is there some kind of things happening? Is there a wave happening or something like that which allows you to be successful now, not 5 years later, or now, not when the time has passed. So if somehow these two questions are answered, then they are likely to be successful. Unicorn or not is a different matter, but why you and why now should be the two questions that need to get answered in the presentation. Got it. So that's a question that a lot of founders also ask, and we have also worked hard on our side to build that process strong enough so that this happens quickly. So I can safely say that from the first meeting, we make our decision to take it to our IC. So we are a fund. So we have our investment committee. So investment committee's decision is final. But our decision to take it to the investment committee can happen as quickly as 2 to 4 weeks. So we are quite fast with that. And then based on when the investment committee meeting is planned, because there are external members in the investment committee, that decision happens. Now after that, there are two branches. One is where we are leading the deal and we are doing the due diligence and we are drafting the agreements. Then of course that due diligence piece has to happen, which can take another 2 to 4 weeks. There the dependence is more on the readiness of the company, because otherwise we have a standard list. But once the IC has given us the go ahead, then we give the term sheet and then quickly do the due diligence, and then that can take between 2 to 4 weeks. So that's the second stage. And the third stage is after everything is done and we have taken the decision now to put the money, we go to our investors for the drawdown. So we have to give them another 4 weeks to draw down the money. And so in 3 months' time, I think the money will be in the bank. So if you're asking specifically when the money will be in the bank, it will be 3 months if we are leading the deal. Now there are other places where we are not leading the deal, which means that after our term sheet, after our IC has given the go ahead, we don't have to do any term sheet or anything like that. Then we can clearly, immediately ask for the money from our investors. So that will cut short that 1 month of due diligence that we would have to otherwise do. It could also happen that during this period, the lead investor is doing the due diligence, but that is not in our hands. So that's the kind of time frame we are talking about. And people just are seeing a lot of opportunity. I mean, everybody thought COVID and pandemic would be an issue, but it has actually become a booster for digital transformation. And you see, not just in the startup space, even public spaces, those valuations have increased, and that trickles down back to the early stages. So Yes, there is a lot of liquidity, and hence there is a lot of money chasing a smaller number of startups. All of that I understand, but there is some strong value proposition also for cloud and all this digital transformation that is happening. So whatever earlier thinking was there in terms of the valuations and so on has little bit definitely changed, and their valuations are much larger compared to earlier, and that just speaks of the opportunity that is there rather than a multiple of revenue and those kind of things. So probably I wouldn't have any kind of formula right now for what revenue to what fundraise that should happen. The opportunity is kind of much bigger, and that's why the valuations you see are much larger. Yeah, so from my experience, like I said, it helped us that we were entrepreneurs and we were talking to entrepreneurs. So I think the one advice to founders would be to figure out who would be the best investors for them, because they're going to be their partners. It is not just who gives the highest valuation or who gives the largest money and so on. The money will come. But if you can find out, I mean, explore, I think I was mentioning to somebody the other day, we have found startups who do due diligence on us while we are doing due diligence on them. And I think that's smart. That's very smart, because now you are in the same journey for a significant period of time. You should do that. You should look at who's trying to invest in you and why are they investing and what is their background and so on, so that they become good partners. So that would be my parting thought. So it's not just about the money, just about the valuation and so on. It's about the kind of partners you're building who will take your company forward to the next step in your journey. So that I would advise the founders to do.